Stop worrying. Take a breath. What you are facing right now did not catch God by surprise. The sleepless nights, the unanswered prayers, the closed doors, the confusion, none of it is wasted. God is not silent. He is strategic. While you're worrying about what you lost, God is preparing what you've never had. Worry makes you feel like everything depends on you. Faith reminds you that everything depends on God. You've been stressing over timeline, outcomes, and people who walked away, but God is saying, let me handle this. The door that closed was not punishment. It was protection. If it's shut, it means it was no longer aligned with where God is taking you. Sometimes God allows pressure not to break you, but to position you. He closes familiar doors so you won't keep turning to places that limit your growth. New doors require new thinking, new trust, and new obedience. And yes, walking toward the unknown can feel terrifying, but that's where faith lives. Worry has a way of quietly stealing your attention. It doesn't arrive loudly. It creeps in through unanswered questions, delayed results, and fear of the unknown. Before you realize it, your thoughts are no longer centered on who God is, but on what you cannot do. That is the danger of worry. It moves your focus away from God's unlimited power and places it squarely on your own limited strength. When you worry, you begin to measure your future by your resources, your experience, and your ability to control outcomes. You ask yourself, how will I fix this? How will I manage this? What if this doesn't work out? These questions make it feel like everything depends on you. But faith was never meant to operate that way. Faith reminds you that God is not bound by what you see, what you have, or what you understand. God's power does not decrease because your situation looks impossible. In fact, impossibility is often the very place where God chooses to work. Worry blinds you to this truth. It convinces you that because you can't see a solution, there must not be one. But God does not need your clarity. He needs your trust. While you are counting obstacles, God is already arranging answers. Worry also drains spiritual strength. It exhausts the mind and weakens the heart, leaving you anxious, restless, and discouraged. The more you worry, the heavier the burden feels because you are carrying something you were never meant to carry alone. God never asked you to figure everything out. He asked you to lean on Him. When you release worry, you make room for peace. When you surrender control, you create space for God's power to move. The moment you shift your focus back to God, perspective changes. What once looked overwhelming begins to shrink in the presence of His greatness. You may still face challenges, but they no longer define you or frighten you. Instead of saying, "This is too much for me," you begin to declare, "This is not too much for my God." Worry keeps you trapped in fear, but faith opens the door to trust. And when trust takes over, God's power becomes visible, not always instantly, but always purposefully. What you are facing right now did not catch God off guard. The news you didn't expect, the door that suddenly closed, the delay that feels unbearable, none of it shocked heaven. While you are trying to process what happened, God already understands the full picture. He sees not only where you are, but where you are going and how every detail fits into His plan. We are often surprised by life because our vision is limited to the present moment. We react emotionally because we only see fragments. But God operates outside of time. He saw this season before you ever stepped into it. He knew the challenge would come, and He also knew the strength you would need to endure it. That means your situation is not a mistake. It is a moment God has already accounted for. When something unexpected happens, the natural response is fear. Fear whispers that things are out of control, that plans have failed, and that the future is uncertain. But the truth is, nothing has slipped out of God's hands. Even when events take a turn you didn't plan for, God remains firmly in control. What looks like chaos to you is still order to Him. God's lack of surprise should bring you comfort. If He knew this was coming, then He also prepared provision, wisdom, and grace in advance. You may not see those resources yet, but they are already in place. God does not react to problem. He responds with purpose. Every delay, detour, and disruption is filtered through his wisdom. This truth invites you to stop panicking and start trusting. Instead of asking, what went wrong? You begin to ask, what is God doing through this? When you understand that God is never surprised, you no longer feel abandoned in uncertainty. You realize you are still being guided even when the path feels unclear. Your situation may feel sudden to you, but it is familiar to God. And because He is not surprised, you can rest knowing that your life is still unfolding exactly as He intended. When a door closes, the first emotion we usually feel is rejection. We assume we weren't good enough, fast enough, smart enough, or faithful enough. We replay conversations, relive decisions, and question our worth. But many times, what feels like rejection is actually God's protection working quietly on your behalf. God sees what you cannot see. He sees the full path behind the door, the hidden consequences, the unseen dangers, the emotional toll, the spiritual cost. A door may look promising on the outside, but God knows what it would eventually take from you. So when He closes it, He is not pushing you away. He is pulling you closer to His will. Some doors close because they would have kept you stuck in cycles that no longer serve your growth. They would have limited your potential, drained your peace, or distracted you from your purpose. God loves you too much to let you settle for something that looks good but leads nowhere. What you call a loss, God calls a rescue. Closed doors also teach discernment. They train your heart not to chase every opportunity, but to seek God's direction instead. Over time, you begin to realize that not every open door is from God, and not every closed door is a setback. Some closures are necessary to redirect you toward what truly belongs to you. It is hard to accept this truth in the moment because closure often comes with pain. There is disappointment, grief, and sometimes embarrassment. But God never wastes pain. He uses it to sharpen your wisdom, deepen your faith, and prepare you for something better. The door closed because it was no longer aligned with where God is taking you. When you understand that closed doors can be protection, your perspective changes. Instead of begging for what ended, you begin to thank God for what He prevented. You stop trying to reopen what God has shut and start trusting that the next door will be safer, stronger, and more aligned with His purpose for your life. Uncertainty is one of the most uncomfortable places to live. It removes predictability, security, and control. You don't know how things will turn out, how long the waiting will last, or what the next step should be. In these moments, fear and anxiety try to take over. Yet this is exactly the environment where faith is strengthened the most. Faith is not built when everything is clear and comfortable. If you already knew the outcome, faith would not be necessary. Faith grows when you are required to trust God without having all the answers. Uncertainty forces you to lean on God's character rather than your understanding. You begin to trust who God is, not just what He does. During uncertain seasons, your relationship with God deepens. Prayer becomes more honest. Dependence becomes more real. You stop relying on plans, start relying on God's presence. What once felt like weakness becomes a doorway to intimacy with Him. You learn to walk step by step instead of demanding the full map. Uncertainty also teaches patience and humility. It reminds you that you are not in control and that surrender is not failure. It is faith. God uses these moments to remove self-reliance and replace it with spiritual confidence. You discover that even when you feel unsure, God remains steady and trustworthy. Many people look back and realize that their greatest spiritual growth happened in uncertain seasons. These were the moments that shaped their faith and sharpened their discernment and strengthened their trust in God. What felt unstable became the foundation for deeper belief. When you accept uncertainty as a player, faith can grow. Fear begins to lose its grip. You may not know what's coming next, but you know who is walking with you. And that knowledge becomes enough. One of the hardest seasons in life is when everything feels still. You're praying, believing, and waiting, but outwardly, nothing is moving. No visible progress, no clear answers, no open doors. It's in these quiet, hidden moments that doubt tries to convince you that God is doing nothing. But silence does not mean absence, and stillness does not mean inactivity. God often does his greatest work behind the scenes. While you see delay, he is arranging details. While you feel forgotten, he is aligning people, timing, and circumstances in ways you cannot yet see. Just because you can't track the progress doesn't mean progress isn't happening. God's work is not always loud or immediate, but is always intentional. Behind the scenes, seasons are preparation seasons. God is shaping your character, strengthening your faith, and refining your patience. He knows that if things move too fast, you might arrive unprepared for what's ahead. So he uses the waiting to mature you internally before he changes things externally. These hidden moments also test trust. Will you continue to believe when there is no evidence? Will you remain faithful when the outcome is uncertain? God watches how you respond in the waiting because your response reveals your readiness. Waiting teaches you to depend on God rather than outcomes. Many breakthroughs are already in motion long before they become visible. Conversations are happening, doors are being positioned, and opportunities are lining up, all without your awareness. God is not late. He is working in layers you cannot access yet. When nothing seems to change, it's often because God is changing things you cannot see within you and around you. And when the moment is right, what has been happening quietly will suddenly become clear, revealing that God was working the entire time. Pressure is uncomfortable, exhausting, and often confusing. When it increases, it can feel like life is closing in on you, as if everything is demanding more than you have to give. Many people assume pressure means something is wrong, but in God's plan, pressure often means something important is happening. God does not apply pressure to crush you. He allows it to position you for what's next. Pressure reveals what is inside you. In comfortable seasons, growth is slow and faith can become passive. But under pressure, your true dependence is exposed. You discover whether you rely on your own strength or on God's power. Pressure pushes you to pray differently, trust more deeply, and let go of things you can no longer carry. God also uses pressure to realign your priorities. When life feels heavy, distractions lose their appeal. What truly matters becomes clear. Pressure strips away what is unnecessary so you can focus on what is essential. In this way, pressure becomes a refining tool, not a destructive force. Many people are positioned for breakthroughs only after seasons of intense pressure. Just before doors open, resistance often increases. The pressure you feel may be evidence that you are close to transition. God is adjusting you so you will be able to handle what he is about to release into your life. Pressure also builds endurance. Without it, you might collapse under the weight of future responsibility. God allows pressure now to strengthen you for greater influence later. What feels overwhelming today is often training for tomorrow. When you understand that pressure is part of God's positioning process, your mindset changes. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You begin to ask, what is this preparing me for? And in that shift, pressure loses its power to discourage you. Familiar doors feel safe. They represent what you know, what you've already learned to manage, and what no longer challenges you. Even when those doors no longer bring growth or fulfillment, they offer comfort because they are predictable. God understands this, which is why he sometimes closes familiar doors, not to hurt you, but to prevent you from staying stuck. Stagnation often disguises itself as stability. You may be functioning, surviving, and even succeeding on the surface, yet deep down you are no longer growing. God never designed your life to remain static. He calls you from glory to glory, from strength to strength. When familiar doors keep you in the same cycle, God closes them so you are forced to move forward. God knows that if certain doors remained open, you would continue returning to what feels easy instead of stepping into what requires faith. Familiar environments can limit vision. They can keep you operating below your potential because you no longer expect more from yourself or from God. Closing those doors disrupts comfort, but it also awakens purpose. These closures are often painful because familiarity carries emotional attachment. It may involve people, routines, or roles that once served you well, but just because something was right for a season does not mean it is meant to last forever. God honors seasons, and when a season ends, He closes the doors so you won't try to live in what has already expired. By closing familiar doors, God creates space for new growth, new skills, and new dependence on Him. He pushes you in environments that stretch you, challenge you, and require you to trust Him at a higher level. What feels like loss is often an invitation to maturity. When you recognize that God closes familiar doors to prevent stagnation, you stop mourning comfort and start embracing transformation. You begin to see that forward movement sometimes requires leaving behind what once felt safe. Every new door God opens comes with a deeper invitation to trust Him. New doors rarely look comfortable or predictable. They often lead into unfamiliar territory where old habits, old strategies, and old mindsets no longer work. This is why stepping through a new door requires more than excitement. It requires obedience rooted in trust. Trust is tested when God asks you to move without explaining every detail. Yield. You may sense the direction clearly, yet the process feels unclear. New doors challenge your need for certainty. God does not always reveal the full plan because He wants your dependence, not just your agreement. Obedience becomes an act of faith when you choose to move forward based on God's voice rather than visible assurance. New levels also demand letting go of what once worked. What brought success in the previous season may not sustain you in the next one. God often calls you to unlearn certain patterns so you can grow into new responsibilities. This can feel risky, but growth always involves change. Trust means believing that God's instruction is safer than your experience. Obedience at a new level also requires courage. Fear tries to convince you to stay where you are, even if where you are is no longer fulfilling. But new doors are not open to keep you comfortable. They are open to expand your capacity. God equips you as you move, not before you move. As you obey, trust deepens. Each step taken in faith strengthens your confidence in God's guidance. You begin to realize that obedience is not about perfection. It is about willingness. God honors steps, not just certainty. New doors are not just about new opportunities. They are about new alignment. Trust and obedience position you to walk fully into what God had prepared, even when the path feels unfamiliar. Delay is one of the most misunderstood experiences in the life of faith. When things don't happen on your expected timeline, it's easy to assume that God has said no. But many times, God has not denied the promise. He is preparing you the situation and the outcome. What feels like waiting is often God working with precision. God understands timing in ways we cannot. He knows when you are ready, when others are ready, and when circumstances are aligned. If something were released too early, it could overwhelm you, damage you, or distract you from the purpose it was meant to serve. Delay is not punishment, it is protection and preparation combined. During delay, God develops patience, endurance, and spiritual maturity. Waiting stretches your faith and reveals your true motivation. Are you seeking the blessing more than the one who gives it? Delay refines your heart so that when the door opens, you can walk through it with humility and wisdom. Delay also prepares unseen elements. While you are waiting, God may be positioning people, resources, and opportunities to meet you at the right moment. But you may feel like nothing is happening, but many things are being arranged beyond your awareness. God is synchronizing details you could never control on your own. Waiting seasons teach you to trust God's character instead of rushing His process. They shift your focus from speed to obedience. You learn that God's timing is not based on urgency, but on purpose. When you understand that delay does not equal denial, frustration gives way to expectation. You stop forcing doors open and start preparing yourself to walk confidently through the door God will open at the perfect time. One of the greatest challenges in life is learning to trust God's timing. Human patience is limited, and when we face delays, our natural instinct is to rush, push, or even settle for less than what God promised. We measure progress by our calendar, our expectations, or the pressure of circumstances. But God's timing is not measured by human standards. It is always precise. God's timing is precise because He sees the full picture. He knows the beginning, the middle, and the end of every situation. What seems late to you is often perfectly timed in the grand design. A door that opens too early could bring confusion, unpreparedness, or even danger. A door that opens exactly when it should ensures maximum impact, blessing, and growth. When you feel like things are delayed, it is easy to compare yourself with others or to question your own worth. But God is not late in His purposes. He does not overlook your prayers, forget your dreams, or abandon His plans. He is orchestrating events with meticulous care, and every detail matters to Him. Precise timing also allows God to align multiple elements in your favor. While you wait, He is arranging people, resources, experiences, and wisdom that will be critical once the door opens. What you see as waiting is often God's invisible preparation for a breakthrough far greater than you imagine. Understanding God's precision requires surrender. It demands that you release control and trust that His clock is perfect. It shifts your perspective from frustration to faith. Instead of asking, why hasn't this happened yet? You begin to ask, what is God doing in the meantime to position me for success? When you embrace that God's timing is precise, you can rest in the confidence that everything is unfolding exactly as it should. You no longer live in anxiety over the delay, but in anticipation of the moment God has ordained for His perfect plan to manifest. Endings are rarely easy. When a chapter in life closes, whether it's a job, a relationship, a season, or even a mindset, it often leaves a sense of loss, fear, or uncertainty. Our natural reaction is to mourn what is gone, to try to hold on to what we know, or to question why life seems unfair. Yet in God's design, every ending carries a purpose, and often that purpose is to make room for something far greater. God understands that you cannot fully embrace new blessings while holding on tightly to the old. If a door remains open long after its season, it can block growth, limit opportunities, and prevent you from stepping into your destiny. When He closes a door, it is not to punish you, it is to remove what no longer serves you so that a higher, more aligned opportunity can take its place. Endings also teach perspective. They show you that life is a journey of constant movement, not a series of permanent stays. While you may feel rejected or disappointed at first, God is inviting you to see beyond the immediate loss. He wants you to trust that the closing of one door is often the opening of another, larger and more fulfilling door that aligns with His promises for your life. Furthermore, endings prepare your heart. They help you release attachments, old habits, or limited thinking that could hinder your future. Sometimes what you are leaving behind has become comfortable but stagnant. God removes it so that your spirit can expand, your vision can grow, and your capacity to receive more can increase. Many breakthroughs in life come immediately after endings. What seems like a setback may be the divine setup for something extraordinary. God uses endings to redirect, refine, and reposition you. When you understand that endings make room for greater things, you begin to shift from grief to gratitude and from fear to expectation. Endings are not a signal that God has forgotten you. They are proof that He is preparing something bigger and better than what you are leaving behind. They are the space where your next blessing, opportunity, or season of favor is being carefully placed. There are doors in life that no amount of pleading, planning, or pushing can open. These are divine doors, opportunities, breakthroughs, and blessings that exist beyond human effort and control. While hard work and diligence are important, there are certain things that only God can unlock, and trying to force them often leads to frustration, disappointment, and even wrong choices. God's doors operate on His terms, not ours. They are designed for the right timing, the right heart, and the right alignment. No degree, no amount of networking, no strategy, and no human influence can replicate what God alone can release. These doors often appear closed for a reason, to preserve your destiny and ensure it when they do open, they align perfectly with His plan. Human effort has limits. You can work tirelessly, plan meticulously, and prepare endlessly, but if a door is meant to be opened by God, your pushing will accomplish nothing. God's doors are opened by faith, prayer, obedience, and alignment with His will. They require surrender, not struggle. Trying to force them often blinds you to the doors God has already positioned, because your focus is on what you can see rather than what He is orchestrating invisibly. God also opens doors in ways we cannot predict. Sometimes opportunities arrive through unexpected people, unusual circumstances, or surprising timing. You may have been knocking on the wrong door for months or years, but God's favor will bring the right door to you without you having to force it. This is why patience and trust are essential, because divine openings often feel sudden, effortless, or even miraculous. Learning to wait for God's doors teaches humility. It reminds you that some things are beyond skill, influence, or control. It shifts your reliance from your own strength to God's wisdom, power, and grace. It also protects you from settling for the wrong opportunity just because it is available, versus the right opportunity that God has designed specifically for you. When you realize that God opens doors no human effort can force, you stop exhausting yourself trying to create opportunities and start focusing on aligning with God. Prayer, faith, obedience, and patience become your tools. And in that alignment, you prepare yourself to walk confidently through the doors that God has personally opened for your life, knowing that nothing else is needed.